IYS, organized by IYS Girls Chennai. This is a part of the special lecture series of Krishna in Vrindavan, which is happening on the eve of Janmashtami fast approaching. So we have these special lecture series, and this is the fifth fifth session. So IYS is ISKCON Youth Services of Chennai Temple. It's a forum created by women, for women, and of women. Here we discuss and learn to practically apply the ancient spiritual wisdom in our modern contemporary lives. We conduct several sessions. On Fridays, we have Bhagavad Gita sessions in Tamil. On Saturdays, we have specially curated sessions on spiritual solutions for contemporary problems faced by modern young women. This will resume once the Janmashtami lecture series are over. On Sundays, we have Telugu sessions in the morning and Prabhupada book reading session in the evening. We also provide mentorship and specialized guidance to sincere spiritual seekers. We are available on WhatsApp, YouTube, Telegram, and Facebook. Link will be posted in the chat window. Please do join if you are not yet a part of the group. We share spiritually inspiring messages, darshan pictures, and announcements for various programs, classes, events, and festivals in the group. If you have any questions during the session, please post them in the chat window and the facilitator would respond to your queries. As usual, please do fill in the feedback form towards the end of the session. We value your suggestions and this will help us serve you better. And coming to the most exciting part, our guest speaker for today's session is Her Grace Urmila Mataji. She is an initiated disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of our ISKCON movement. Mataji has been practicing and teaching Bhakti Yoga since 1973, and she has been teaching since then. She regularly visits temples and holy places worldwide to hold discourses on topics of yoga, mantra meditation, and living in spiritual consciousness within this world. She has a Bachelor's of Science from Excelsior College in Religion and Education. From the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, she has a Master of School Administration and a PhD in Educational Leadership. Her primary research has been on job satisfaction of teachers in Krishna primary and secondary schools worldwide. She was a primary and secondary teacher for 27 years and has 19 years of experience with school management. She is certified as a master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, a counseling and teaching system. She is certified in the Prepare system of premarital counseling. Urmila Mataji is the chair of Shastric Advisory Council in the GBC, an associate editor of Back to Godhead, and formerly a professor of sociology of religion at Bhaktivedanta College. She has also published several articles and books, both for adult and children, on the science of Bhakti Yoga. Some of her publications include Essence Seekers, Vaikuntha Children, a guidebook for devotional education, The Great Mantra for Mystic Meditation, and Dr. Best Learn to Read, an 83-book complete literacy program. So, Mataji, thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. So, over to you. Very excited to hear from you. Over to you, Mataji.
Thank you very much. So, Hare Krishna. Ma'om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Śrīmati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nivasesa Sannivadi. So today we're going to look at the pastime of Krishna swallowing the forest fire. There's two swallowing the forest fire pastimes. We're going to look at one of them today. But we're going to look at one of them in terms of how we deal with difficulties in our own life, and particularly how we deal with difficulties from this age of Kali. Okay. So we're going to meditate today on seeing our lives as part of Krishna's story, seeing our lives as part of Krishna's adventures. So we're going to start off with this quote from Jaiva Dharma. This is by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the father of the guru of Srila Prabhupada and a great acharya of Krishna consciousness. He wrote, the Leelas of Śrī Kṛṣṇa are unlimited and variegated. Hence, this material world also is another of his many unique activities. When the Supreme Autocrat willfully engages in a kaleidoscope of pastimes, why should it be unusual for him to enact this particular pastime? If the principle of variegated Leelas is kept intact, not a single type of Leela can be rejected. So if you don't know what a kaleidoscope is, it's usually a child's toy. It's usually a tube and that you look through. At the end of the tube, there's little pieces of colored plastic or glass and little beads and stuff with mirrors. And when you turn the tube, it makes beautiful pictures that are constantly changing. You never get the same picture twice. So here Bhaktivinoda is saying that this material world, creating, maintaining this material world, is another one of the unlimited variety of pastimes of Krishna. Going on, he says, whatever the Leela, the participants assisting the Lord may have to accept many hardships and pain. Śrī Kṛṣṇa is the Purusha, the supreme enjoyer and absolute master. All the Upakarana, participants and paraphernalia are fully under the control of the Purusha, and they are the working tools of the Supreme Creator. In fully surrendering oneself to the sweet will of the Supreme Lord, it is only natural that one may have to accept adversities also. If finally this material adversity turns into an auspicious state that is far from miserable, then why ultimately should one call it adversity? So this is interesting because at first Bhaktivinoda is saying that there will be hardships and pain, and then he's saying that it becomes auspicious. Therefore, how can we call it pain? So that sounds like, we go through, like you see a doctor, and the doctor may do some painful medical procedure that afterwards leads to health. And so one may say, well, it can't really be a painful procedure because it leads to health. But still, that sounds like while we're undergoing the procedure, it is painful. It is difficult. All right, but he goes on to clarify. And he says, on the transcendental platform, the tribulations of the jiva, while trying to satisfy the Lord in his pastimes, are by all accounts pleasurable. So here he's clarifying that the process is also pleasurable. It's not just that it's something difficult that leads to pleasure, but the process is actually pleasurable. So the hardships and pain are an appearance only. So where does this appearance come from? So here he explains, yet the conditioned soul, by misuse of his free will, denies himself the exaltation one experiences whilst directly assisting Śrī Kṛṣṇa in his transcendental pastimes. Instead, he embraces Maya, who gives him only acute harassment. If anyone is to blame for this dilemma, it is the jiva and definitely not Krishna. So here Bhaktivinoda is saying something very profound. He's saying if we see this material world as Krishna's pastimes, which it is, there will be apparent hardships and pain, which have the ultimate end of bringing us happiness. But if we choose to have a different way of looking at a different consciousness, a different attitude, then we will have a feeling of exaltation. If we choose to be in illusion, illusion means we don't see the world as Krishna's pastime. We see the world differently. Then we will feel harassment. And this is 100% entirely our choice. It's not that Krishna is creating difficulty. It's that we are choosing to perceive what is happening as difficulty. That may sound ridiculous. We may say, objectively, I've broken my leg, that's difficult. But it's not like that. It's simply our choice and our consciousness. All right, so let's look at this pastime of Krishna, and then we'll analyze it some more. So this fire was an actual event that we're going to study today, but it also is a metaphor. It's both an event and a metaphor. So it is a metaphor, it is a symbol for the obstacles that atheists create against Dharma and against preachers of Dharma. So that's one of the big problems that exists in this world, and it particularly exists in Kali, in the age of Kali, this is a painting of Maharaj Parikshit, the great King Parikshit, chastising the personified age of Kali. So at this time, especially at this time, there's preachers of adharma. People are actively, government, the educators, business people, they're actively preaching things against the very consciousness that will bring us happiness. So Krishna consciousness, spiritual consciousness, is what allows us to actually experience everything in our life with exaltation. And adharma is where we experience everything in our life as harassment. And so actively, the intellectuals, the government leaders, the media, business, and entertainers, they're all trying to convince us not to have this higher consciousness. They're trying to convince us to have a materialistic consciousness that gives us a sense that this whole world is simply a matter of harassment, that we're simply being harassed, that we are victims, that we are being harassed. And so this forest fire represents these obstacles, these huge obstacles. All right. So the story starts actually with the end of another story, and that is a demon, a magical shape-shifting wizard named Pralamba, who made himself look like one of Krishna's friends, and they were playing a game. But the purpose of his game was to kill Balaram and then to try to kill Krishna. So he apparently lost the game. Balaram was therefore able to carry Balaram, and he carried Balaram across the Yamuna away from the other boys to this huge banyan tree in a place called Bhāṇḍīra in Vrindavan. And there he showed his real form as a demon, and then Balaram killed him. So the other boys naturally wanted to see where Balaram went to and what all this noise was about. So they brought their animals and they crossed the Yamuna, and then they were there in Bhāṇḍīra under this big tree. And so there they were with their animals, and they had cows, goats, and buffalo. And they were so excited that Balaram had killed Pralamba. They were so happy that they were playing very exuberantly, and therefore they didn't notice that their animals wandered off. Now we have to keep in mind that these are very young children. They're really very young. They're 5 or 6 years. So they're very young children, and naturally, they're not always that responsible. So they're just playing, in this huge banyan tree. Banyan tree is a great place to play because it's so complex. And because they're absorbed in their playing, therefore the animals wandered off. They're supposed to be taking care of the animals. So we see a couple things here. We see that although we're very happy in our service to Krishna, at the same time, we should also be responsible. Like we find Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's intimate associates, the 6 Goswamis, were constantly in ecstasy. Hey, Radhe, Vrajadevi, K, Chalalite, Nandasuno, Kata. They were always in ecstasy, meditating on Radha and Krishna and the gopis and their pastimes. At the same time, they wrote so many books and they restored many holy places. And they were assisting in even Dhira Dhira Jana Priyo Priyakaro. They were helping the people of the Vrindavan area, even in their marital disputes. They were sought out by both pious and impious people as a great reservoir of help. So they were very present. I mean, they were also in mystic trance, absorbed in divine lila, but they were also very present to what needed to be done on the planet. Yeah. So we need to also be responsible in our service and not just, I'm in so much ecstasy that I'm not going to be responsible anymore. And the other thing is the animals. So our acharyas explain that the animals were greedy for enjoyment. They were thinking, as we often say, the grass is greener on the other side. They thought, oh, over there I will get better grass. Over there I will get better grass. Now this is astonishing because these cows, goats, and buffalo are also Krishna's associates. They're not ordinary animals. They're saintly persons in the forms who have a spiritual form of a cow, a goat, or a buffalo. So we should understand this correctly. This on the part of everyone is a pastime, but there is also a lesson here about, just caring about our own enjoyment in this world and constantly looking for newer and newer enjoyment, and therefore causing trouble to the other devotees, right? We see this kind of phenomena, where a person gets married twice, 3 times, 5 times, 6 times, or they're constantly changing constantly changing what they're doing, always looking for something better, and just causing a disturbance. We've all seen people like this. They take up some responsibility and then, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something else. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something else. Now, we should certainly, it's our duty to situate ourselves in the service that is best fit for our nature. And sometimes we may change our service because Krishna wants us to change our service. So we've gotten older, we've gotten more mature, there's another need. But just to change out of restlessness ends up causing a disturbance. So these cows walked about 15 kilometers and they went to a forest that cows, goats, and buffalo. And they went to a forest that's called Ichikatava or Mandiyari or Munjaranya. So this forest had these 3 different names. And they ended up in a far, far away forest. And this is what happens when we are absorbed in trying to satisfy ourselves in this world instead of being under the shelter of Krishna's devotees. When we're under the shelter of Krishna's devotees, we're under the shelter of Krishna, we'll actually get full satisfaction. But if we're not careful, we wander off. We may end up very far away. And they went so far away, and after all, at least externally, they're animals, that they ended up getting caught in some canes that were very sharp. And so the leaves were very sharp and cutting. I'm sure sometimes you've been around plants that actually are painful. And so in looking for grass, they just didn't notice that they were walking into this field of cane. And once they walked into it, they couldn't get out. So this is very typical of materialistic life, that we get ourselves entangled in something and then we can't get back out again. So there's a story, this is a true story. There was a woman who was a very experienced hiker, and she was visiting some friends in Hawaii, a very beautiful place. and she decided to take a hike. Now, even though she was an experienced hiker, or maybe because she was an experienced hiker, she got a little proud, and she thought, I don't need to tell anybody where I'm going. Actually, she didn't think like that. She just simply didn't tell anybody where she was going. Maybe she thought for a minute, oh, I should tell somebody where I'm going. Oh, I'm just going to take a little walk. I'm an experienced hiker. It's not a problem. Somehow she dismissed it. So she's walking around, and all of a sudden she realizes that she doesn't know how to get back. And again, she's an experienced hiker, so she should have known how to mark her trail. But, sometimes, again, when we're very experienced, we may be a little proud and think, well, I'm very experienced. I don't need to take ordinary precautions. So she did not mark her way. She did not know how to get back. And she thought, well, maybe if I can go to a higher place, then I can see more clearly, and I can see where I am. So she sees a rocky hill, and she thought, I'll climb up there. I can see from up there. And she starts to climb, and it was rather steep. And she had some difficulty climbing with her pack. She had packed with some food, water, a flare, things like that. And she thought, let me put my pack down for a moment. I'll just climb up there really quickly and come back down, because she just couldn't climb up with her pack. It was too steep. And she thought, it's just a short way up. So she puts down her pack. You can all see where this is going now. And she climbs up, and she couldn't get down. She wasn't able to get back down. And when she got to the top, there was a flat space, but it was very small. It was very small. It was only 3 meters long and 1 meter wide, just enough room for her to lie down on, to sit. But there was no way to get down. And she had left her pack at the bottom. So Hawaii is a tropical place. Not as hot as Chennai. It doesn't get as hot as Chennai. It's generally pleasant all year, but it is tropical. And she was thirsty, but she had no water. She had no food. She had no flare, and so forth. So she's up there. And at one point she says, God, why did you put me in such a situation? And then she realized, of course, that she had put herself in that situation. Now, obviously, in order for me to be able to tell this story, it must have a happy ending, because we wouldn't be able to tell the story unless she had gotten rescued. I think she got rescued by helicopter. But the point is that it's very easy to do this. It's very easy to become absorbed in our own pleasure, our own desires, and we wander off, and then we're stuck somewhere. We're stuck in some situation. So the cows got stuck in these canes, and they had wandered 15 kilometers from the Yamuna. So they were starting to feel very thirsty. Meanwhile, a fire started in the area. A forest fire started, and the heat of the forest fire added to the general heat. It added to the general heat. And so they were very, very thirsty from being far from the river and from a fire starting. Meanwhile, back in Bhāṇḍīra, the boys felt remorse that they neglected their duties and their livelihood, because this was part of the farming community. And so the animals were a source of livelihood for everyone. Our acharyas say that Krishna and Balaram were not remorseful. They just wanted to experience a new pastime. And so ultimately, they were very happy that this was an opportunity for a new pastime. That's Sanatana Goswami. Jiva Goswami says this. And the acharyas also explained that the cowherd boys weren't feeling remorse and guilt like an ordinary person who feels self-hatred. Ordinary remorse and guilt tends to be very much affected by what we call tamagun, the mode of ignorance, where, as I say, we have self-hatred, and where what we're feeling uncomfortable about is prideful. Because we think we're so great, we feel very uncomfortable when we do something that makes it very obvious that we're not great. So it's not like that for these cowherd boys who are great saints. They already have full humility. What they're feeling is love. They're feeling love for their animals, who are also devotees. So on the highest level, we're motivated by love, not guilt. I mean, guilt's useful for a second or two, but it's maybe a minute. But it's to just be motivated by guilt and remorse and shame is very much ignorance. It's contrary to spirituality. One should be motivated by love. I don't want to hurt someone that I love. Not so they'll think well of me or they'll think well of myself, but because I want to give happiness to those that I love. So they couldn't find their animals anywhere. They were looking and looking and looking. Finally, they crossed the Yamuna, and being, cowherding was their family profession, so they knew how to follow the path of the hoofprints and the eaten grass. Now, generally, Vrindavan is a spiritual place. It's a magical place. And so when the cows, goats, and buffalo, when they eat grass, the grass immediately grows back up again. So generally, it would not be possible to follow the path of eaten grass, but to facilitate this pastime, the Lord's energies arranged that there was a path of eaten grass and also a place where the grass was beaten down from the hoofprints. And so the boys were also having to walk for 15 kilometers, right? And so the boys were getting pretty tired and they were also feeling thirsty. Now, again, these boys are spiritual beings who don't feel thirsty and tired as those of us who have a material body, but it's all varieties of exaltation. But superficially, they're hungry, they're not hungry, they're thirsty and tired. And then Krishna, even though he's just a little boy, ostensibly, he is calling with a voice like thunder. So Krishna's voice is often compared to thunder, and even when he's very small. We have the story you all may know of Krishna lifting Govardhan Hill, and it said there, Krishna's only like 7, 8 years old. And when he's talking to Indra, who's apologizing, it also says that Krishna has his voice like thunder. So Krishna's calling out the names of the cows. Hamsi, Gavali. So many names of the cows he's calling. But, Hamsi, Dhavali, very thunderous, authoritative. And finally, they get close to where the cows are. And then the cows hear the voice of Krishna. They hear the voice of the cow, voices of the cow, and they're all excited. And animals are all responding in their own, they're responding in their own voices. So when we get lost in this world, sometimes we hear the voice of God. Sometimes we get a call, so to speak, that, maybe we get a book, get a Bhagavad Gita, we get some prasadam, we get some invitation to be with the devotees, we get some kind of a call. But then we have to respond. And we have to respond. That's on us. The call is what we call causeless mercy. That Krishna and his devotees call for us when we're lost in the world and we're lost in our own entanglement. But then it's on us to respond. It's on us to respond favorably. So the animals respond. And then the boys. The boys are so happy. They're always joyful, but their joy is coming in waves. And so they have this wave of joy. Everybody is experiencing this wave of joy. Cows, goats, and buffalo. Krishna and Balaram and all the boys. It's reunited. So we get entangled in this world, in our own karma, our own activities, our own foolishness. The devotees and the Lord call for us. We respond. They find us, and it's so joyful. I found Krishna, Krishna's found me. Our life is like it's beginning anew. The wonderful, wonderful feeling of taking up spiritual life, and everybody is rejoicing. And in this rejoicing, as you remember, they were thirsty. So in this rejoicing, they're all going to walk back to the river. And of course, the journey back to the river is feeling much shorter, right? You had this experience. It's not the journey to someplace, maybe a lot longer, especially when there's anxiety. And now that there's success and everyone's singing and dancing and the animals, and even though they were tired and thirsty, now they have new life and joyfulness, like when we take up spiritual life. But what they don't see is that there's a fire behind them. And again, this fire represents people who are teaching and pushing adharma. So in this world, when we want to take up spiritual life, there are going to be many forces that push against us. There are going to be forces that push against us to not take up spiritual life, to practice adharma, to go back into our material consciousness. They're going to be tempting us to have materialistic consciousness. And this is going to happen throughout our spiritual journey. And here, this is both literally and metaphorically in the form of a great fire. So everyone feels this heat of this fire, and it's described as fire surrounds everyone in all 8 directions. So north, south, east, west, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. So sometimes it feels like this, that we want to take up spiritual life, but the pressure can be coming from our own mind, from our friends, from the media, from school, from our family. The pressure to think materialistically, to think that I'm a victim, to think, oh, everything is just miserable and I'm victimized by this misery. Why can't I be happy? I'm going to be happy by conquering my enemies and being the Lord of the world. This can surround us and practically keep us from spiritual breathing in this great fire and smoke. Sometimes it said that this fire was a demon who was friends with Palamba, angry that Palamba was killed. Sanatana Goswami says the fire wanted to associate with Krishna. So when this fire is surrounding them, it's surrounding on all 8 sides, and therefore there's no way out. You know, when there's a severe fire, the government gives evacuation orders. Everybody has to leave their house. And there'll be some way out. There's some escape route that one takes to get away from the fire. But in this case, there was no escape, because the fire had gone on all sides. So it says in the Bhāgavatam that the boys prayed as if they were afraid of death. So we say as if, because being fully in spiritual consciousness, the boys are not afraid of death. They don't want to be separated from Krishna, and they don't want the animals to be hurt. They're not afraid of death. Fear of death is a fear of losing our material identity and our material situation, but they don't have a material identity. They have no attachment to a material situation, so they're not afraid. And the boys were dependent on Krishna. They're dependent on Krishna when they're playing. They're dependent on Krishna in the fire. And they say, Krishna can save us and Balaram can help. First, they just ask Balaram and Krishna together, and they just ask Krishna because they have special affection for Krishna. And they remember that the great sage Garga Muni told Krishna's father that Krishna would be just like Narayana, and that anyone who asked him for help would be saved. So the mood of the cowherd boys is not that Krishna is God. The mood of the cowherd boys is that Krishna is my friend. Krishna likes this intimate mood of Vrindavana, where people forget that he's God, just like any president or prime minister wants to be with his friends or family who just treat him like an ordinary person. So Krishna likes this very much. But they do have some awareness that he's God. And they're doing it externally by remembering, oh, Gordon, when he said that he would be like God. Then Krishna says to the boys, close your eyes. Now, this seems very interesting. I mean, if we're in a great fire and we see no means of escape, then, and we go to someone and say, please help us. Please help us. So we wouldn't expect that the kind of help they give us would be to say, close your eyes. Right? That seems kind of like an escapist thing. You know, what good is it going to do to just close my eyes? So our acharyas explained that Krishna didn't want them to see him swallowing the fire, because then they might think, oh, Krishna will get hurt, and they'd run to try to help him, and that would be a disturbance. Also, it was his way of tricking them to bring them back to Bhāṇḍīra. And the boys, though, were thinking, how will it help if I close my eyes? Srila Prabhupada says that Krishna spoke with his eyes and basically told the cowherd boys, don't be afraid. Just close your eyes and don't be afraid. So many times when we're in difficulty, it's just, okay, Krishna, you take care of me. I don't know what to do, but you take care. And the boys, when they closed their eyes, they were thinking, maybe Krishna's going to use jewels or mantras and herbs to stop this fire, but maybe his method for stopping the fire only works if nobody can see what he's doing. Maybe it has to be. So that was what they thought. They thought he's got a special trick, he's got some special magic, but it only works if nobody can see it. And so that's why he's telling us to close his eyes. Many times in our life, Krishna acts in ways that doesn't make sense to us. We're surrounded by fire. Krishna says, close your eyes. So it may be like that in our lives, that we're having some difficulty. And the way that Krishna is dealing with us, we're just like, how is that going to help? I don't get it. Right? And if we try to understand Krishna's motives, we may get it wrong. Like the boys were thinking Krishna has some magical spell that has to be done in secret. To really understand the plan and the will of the Lord, sometimes we can understand it by his grace, other times we can't. But it's not always necessary for us to understand it. Then while the cowherd boy's eyes were closed, Krishna swallows the forest fire. So why? So our acharyas say that Krishna wanted to show Brahma and others his love for his friends. Some of them say he swallowed the fire because he had a thirst for it. And this may seem a little peculiar, but if we think about it, people do like spicy food. Right? People regularly like spicy food. They have a desire to eat fire. I mean, I personally can't eat things with chilies. It upsets my digestion. But there are many people who enjoy. And if there's no chilies, they say there's no taste to the food. So the devotees can't bear to think of Krishna swallowing fire. It's horrible to them. So many times the devotees like to imagine that Yogamaya turned the fire into a refreshing cup of beverage, or that the fire itself became frayed and became a refreshing cup of it. Don't worry, Krishna is not hurt, but Krishna can eat fire. In fact, in the universal form, it says that the tongue of the Lord is fire. So for Krishna to swallow the fire is not at all painful. So Krishna swallowed the fire, and then The boys and cows and goats and buffalo, they did not have to walk back to Bhāṇḍīra, but they were transported there magically. They had gone almost unconscious when they opened their eyes, and they were back in Bhāṇḍīra. And some of our acharyas say that Krishna said, okay, you can open your eyes now. And some of our acharyas say that the boys did this on their own initiative, that they understood that, okay, now we can open our eyes. So the cowherd boys then, when they magically ended up back in Bhāṇḍīra, they thought, wow, Krishna must be a demigod. It wasn't like Arjuna. When Arjuna saw Krishna's universal form, he became overwhelmed by awe. But when the cowherd boys saw this mystic feat of Krishna, they did not become overwhelmed by awe. They maintained their feeling of intimate friendship. So they thought, well, maybe Krishna's a demigod. Oh, if he's a demigod, we're his friends. Maybe we're demigods too. So that was their mood. And then it's explained that Krishna started playing his flute in an amazing magical way, and along with the boys and the animals, made his way back to the village in order to ease the suffering of the cowherd ladies. Then the boys told Nanda, Yasoda, etc., how they were saved from the forest fire and how Pralamba was killed. This is the end of the summer. This pastime occurs at the end of the summer and the beginning of the rainy season. And so now in India, it's the rainy season. Right now where I am, it's pouring rain, although we don't have a rainy season here. But anyway, this was something that happened at the end of the summer. So how can we see our own life? I really like this letter from Srila Prabhupada to Jayapataka Swami, where he says, the secret of surrendering to Krishna, such surrendered devotees see that everything is part of Krishna's plan, that whatever is meant to be, I am doing that. So let me do it with my full attention to every detail. Let me become absorbed in such service. Never mind what it is, but let all other considerations be forgotten, and only my desire to do the best thing for Krishna's alone pleasure be my motive. That is advanced stage of understanding devotional service or Krishna consciousness. We really want to focus here on surrendered devotees, see that everything is part of Krishna's plan. Whatever is meant to be, I am doing that. That doesn't mean that whatever I'm doing at this moment, I have to do forever. It's not that I have to teach this presentation forever and not sleep or eat or chant my japa, or it's not that I'm supposed to do this forever. But whatever situation I'm in, whatever people I'm with, that is ultimately Krishna's arrangement. And I want to respond to it in the right way. I want to say, what service does Krishna have for me in this moment, in this situation? To pay attention, as Prabhupada said, to every detail, to be really absorbed in that service. Whatever service Krishna has, it may be just in being nice to a person. And Krishna says, one who's a kind friend to all living entities, one who's not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, is very dear to me. Maybe that's our service. Maybe tolerating heat and cold is our service. And Prabhupada also writes in Bhagavad Gita 1846, everyone should think that he's engaged in a particular type of occupation by Rishikesh, the master of the senses. By the result of the work in which one is engaged, as Supreme Personality of Godhead, Śrī Kṛṣṇa should be worshipped. If one thinks always in this way, in full Krishna consciousness, then by the grace of the Lord, he becomes fully aware of everything. That is the perfection of life. So, of course, we're supposed to be engaged according to our nature, and we should understand that Krishna desires that we be engaged according to our nature, and that in every moment we should be dedicating whatever we're doing to Krishna. All right, so I want to go on. This is a recording of Srila Prabhupada telling the story. It's about 5 minutes long that we can listen to.
And Krishna and Balaram, along with his friends, were engaged in such pastimes in the forest and killing the Palamba. So the cows, being freed from their observation, began to proceed more and more and enter into the deepest part of the forest, being allured by fresh grasses within the forest. This way, all the goats, cows, buffaloes, while traveling from one forest to another, they entered another forest which was known as Isikatobi. This Isikatobi forest was full with green grass, and therefore they are cured by the place. But when they entered, they saw that there was a forest fire, and thus they began to cry. On the other side, Rama, Krishna, along with his cowherds friends, when they could not trace out their animals, they became very much aggrieved and thinking where the cows had gone. They began to trace out the cows by following their footprints, as well as the path of eaten grass by the cows. And all of them were thinking that their means of livelihood, the cows, are now lost. By searching out the cows in the forest and were hearing the crying sounds of the cows, they were themselves were very much tired and thirsty. They began to return from that place. Krishna then began to call for the cows by their respective names with great voice, and the cows also immediately after hearing Krishna's calling replied the call with great joy. This time the forest fire surrounded all of them. The scene appeared to be very fearful. While the flames of the forest fire were expanding, there was a companion of the fire, the wind blowing very fast. The whole thing together appeared as if they were prepared to devour everything movable and not movable in that spot. All the cows and the cowherd's boy became too much frightened by the expansion of the fire. All the cowherd's boy began to look towards Bhāṇḍīra, Krishna, as if a dying man was looking to the picture of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He began to say like this, "My dear Krishna, my dear Krishna, both you and Balaram are very powerful, but now burning by the pressure of the blazing fire. Let us take the shelter of your lotus feet. We know you can protect us from this great danger. My dear friend Krishna, we are your intimate friends. It does not behove that we shall suffer in this condition of life. We are all completely dependent on you, and you are the knower of all religious life. But we do not know anyone else except yourselves." The personality of Godhead heard this appealing voice of his friends, and with pleasing glance over them began to answer as follows. He impressed upon his friends by speaking through the eyes that there was no cause of fear. Don't be worried. As Krishna, the supreme, mystic, powerful personality of Godhead, immediately swallowed up all the flames of the fire within his mouth. All the cows and cowherds' boys were thus saved from the imminent danger. Cowherds' boys, there out of fear, became almost unconscious, but when they came to their consciousness and opened their eyes, they saw that all of them, along with Krishna, Balaram and the cows, they are again in the Bhāṇḍīra forest. When they found themselves along with their cows in safe place, all of them became very much astonished. When the cowherd's boys saw themselves completely free from the attack of the blazing fire and their cows are safe, they thought within themselves that Krishna was not an ordinary boy, but he was some demigod. Plus Krishna and Balaram, along with cowherds, boys and cows, returned to Vrindavan in the evening while playing on their flutes. They returned in the village of Vrindavan.
So this is a story of Krishna swallowing the forest fire. We have a little bit of time, 10 minutes maximum, if anybody has any questions.
Thank you for the wonderful session, Mataji.
Sure, and please keep
so
your
we
questions
have,
to the topic of the class.
Okay, Mataji. Here a person has typed a question. I want to ask that how we can control our mind to do bhakti and how we can control our unnecessary desires.
Well, that is mostly the association of the devotees. So if we have some good association, then we can much more easily engage in the process of bhakti, no matter what our mind is telling us. And of course, someone needs to mute here. And then it is a question of forming good habits, and the taste from the bhakti itself, the joy from the bhakti itself, becomes our impetus. As far as unnecessary desires, mostly we just need to sort of look at them and laugh at them and just say, oh, that's funny. And sometimes we have to, if the desire is really bothersome, then we need to go to Krishna and say, Krishna, I have this desire. Please help me to deal with this. Please either fulfill this desire in a way that's favorable for your service, or help me to become free from this desire if there's no way for it to be favorable for your service.
Thank you, Mataji. Tanu, I hope that answers your question. There is okay. Someone has typed. Kartikeshwari has typed. Hare Krishna, Mataji. This is not a question. It's just a and so Hare Krishna, Mataji. I'm so blessed, Mataji. Once again, listening to your lectures, your teachings has been a much factor for my parents in initiation of bhakti. Is that a question, Kartikeshwari? Is that a question? Can you please clarify?
It's not a question. It's obviously not a question. Okay. Does anyone? But thank you very much.
There is a following statement.
I'm glad I can be of assistance. And does anyone else have a question?
There is another question, Madhuri.
Okay.
My question is how we can motivate others to join Krishna consciousness.
How we can what?
Motivate others to join Krishna consciousness.
Well, there's so many ways. Ultimately, by ourselves being happy in Krishna consciousness, and by remembering that Krishna is all attractive. So there's something about Krishna that's attractive to anyone and everyone. Okay, we have a nice question here. How can I keep myself in Krishna consciousness and always the same consistent? That's not possible until about 40% of your anartas or desires are destroyed. So until that time, one has to be patient with the inconsistencies. And once, as we progress in bhakti and as our unwanted things become destroyed, we'll find it easier and easier to be consistent. Is there anything else?
Hare Krishna Mataji. I think Mahalakshmi Mataji would like to ask a question. Sure. I'm trying to unmute her, but yes.
Okay. Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for your class. How can we differentiate clearly Krishna's call from all these interferences that are around us?
Oh, it's a very good question, because Krishna's call is backed up by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Because what Krishna is calling us is going to be the same thing that he says in Shastra, and the same thing that his devotees say, the same thing that Guru says. Okay, so if we're in a workplace and we start practicing bhakti, how to do that correctly that would inspire other people, that is really a question for another seminar. How can we engage in our work as an offering to Krishna? So at every moment to think about that Krishna is engaging me in this work, and then I'm doing it for his pleasure. But that's a very short answer, but really that's another hour class. Okay, so I think we will end here. Thank you very much for this opportunity. We really want to thank Srila Prabhupada for giving us all this knowledge and inspiration. We do have one more question we'll take, and then we'll end. How do we develop the faith to close our eyes? We need to trust that Krishna will resolve the situation. We know we have done our part and simply need to surrender. It goes on simultaneously. We do our part and we surrender simultaneously. Doing our part is part of our surrender. That's part of what's required. So again, thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you very much, Mataji. Hare Krishna.